Back for another session, we have James Harrington. He is the CEO of the Ugandan Water Project and a friend I've known for the last 3 years. James has this unique passion and approach to what he does in leading a nonprofit. And that passion, I believe, is the secret sauce in making it work. So James, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Lisa. Great to be with you again.
I know we're going to have a great conversation. And I know this because as we have been through episodes since the time you've been here, and I will link that past episode in the show notes, is I have come to know you as very much a businessman first and not what we traditionally see in the nonprofit space. So that's where a lot of the folks that listen to the show are, and I think they're going to have a great interest in looking at nonprofits in perhaps a different way. So as we go back to our previous episode, you shared the story of what inspired you to start the Ugandan Water Project, but it's been a while. So I'd like to know what makes you to continue to be so passionate about this work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get asked that because the truth is there isn't necessarily a lot of longevity for people in these roles. You tend to see people come for a season more often than a lifetime. And 16 years, 17 years since we first started this is a long time. I would say there's two things that really keep me engaged, excited, and loving it. Because we all know, you're not in the nonprofit sector for the money, right?
Right.
There's got to be something else that's holding it. And it really comes down for me to two things: relationships and impact. I love the relationships we're seeing in the communities we serve, the relationship with the journey with our staff, the men and women in the U.S., and we've got 50 staff in Uganda, all these amazing Ugandan professionals, and helping them grow, seeing them work for a better future, serving their communities, their neighbors. And then honestly, the relationships with donors and volunteers along the journey with us. It is amazing to see people grasp their ability to make an impact in the world. And then again, impact is the other big thing. This is a solvable problem. So we are seeing change. We are seeing finish lines crossed. We are seeing people set free from the bondage of waterborne disease and poverty. And so that is a really exhilarating feeling. And honestly, I woke up this morning, the sun was out, and I was ready to go after it again today. And it's because of those things.
And that really does make a difference. If you can solve a problem, and, I think, and this is not related to anything at all of what you're doing, but when you think about things in your life that when you do it, it appears again and appears again, and there is not anything you could do to make it go away. But you have latched on to a problem that we as global citizens of the world can help solve. And I think that would be very inspiring to be able to see the progress and chart the progress. So that leads me to the next question I have is, unlike the traditional nonprofit style that we typically see, you run the Ugandan Water Project as a business type approach.
Very much, yeah.
Yeah, and that really makes you stand out as a nonprofit leader. So tell us a little bit, why did you choose this model?
Yeah, I think a lot of us, I'm not that different than everybody that supports us, to be honest. I think we all, we can see things that we believe should change in the world. And many of us say, hey, maybe I can help. But I think a lot of us then run into the first barriers of just doubts or fears or lack of clarity. And I know maybe you're like me. I ask myself, well, do I really know what's happening with the money? I worked hard for this money. What's going to happen to it, right? Also, I really care about seeing change. Are these people any good at that, right? And so I think there's a lot of us that share those same fears or questions. And so I think that there's a clarity and a value proposition that we hold right out in front, and just a real respect for donor as partner or donor as investor. And that helps us to overcome that. When I think about what I would want in a relationship to an organization, I want to feel that they're going after this cause with not just passion, but urgency and efficiency. And I think those are things that pull very easily from a lot of the language and approach and style and even just, the standard of performance that comes often in the business world. And I think, why does the charity sector often struggle with that? Well, let's be honest. There are a lot of things that charities are pursuing that don't have a market. And so to solve them does require a different strategy of engagement. And so I do understand the tension, but we find that approaching it this way really helps to overcome some of the fears and build trust and transparency and drive us to high impact, I think.
Yeah, that really does make a difference. And when we're talking about business, when we start looking at business, we're looking at operational strategy. What is it that makes things work? So what type of operational strategies have you employed that would set the Ugandan Water Project aside from other nonprofits?
Yeah, I think there's a few things about I think time and money are the things we all value the most, right? I mean, ultimately it's about relationship, but oftentimes the way we navigate investing in relationships and providing for relationships, it comes down to these commodities of time and money. And so I think that's a big place we start, is we like to be very clear on how long it takes us to do things, the standard we hold ourselves to. So for instance, we try to do things on a 60-day timeline for a lot of our projects, but also being upfront about how much things cost. In the beginning, we didn't know. We were learning as we went, but we have a lot of experience. And I think it really helps to overcome a lot of, confusion or just apprehension from those that want to invest in this mission, to be able to say, hey, if you want to drill a well, it's going to cost $10,000 to $12,000 and it's going to happen in 13 weeks. Like, that is really helpful. Yeah. And I think there's other things, we have embraced this value of being transparent wherever possible. There's a certain diminishing return on letting everybody know every bit and step we take along the journey. But I think drawing people close to the problem helps build engagement, but also close to the solutions and the organization that's implementing it. I think transparency where possible, whether it's in reporting or just, being approachable, being available, and creating opportunities for donors to step in to understand more or to get to know us where they have interest.
All right. So when we're looking at this and people are evaluating, as business leaders, we're looking at specific KPI metrics that can really impact our decision making. So do you have maybe some numbers you could share with us, James? Yes,
I have more numbers than you would ever want to hear. But I do think, a lot of times you hear stuff in our society, well, it's not about numbers. Well, it absolutely is about numbers, because those numbers very quickly become being about relationships. And that's what, that really is important. That's why we're doing this, right? So I think, we work at this today, tomorrow, forever framework, right? Water access today, sustainability tomorrow, and systems change and security forever. And so I think about our today level, and we track the number of people who have access to safe water because of what we've done. So I can tell you that at the end of the last quarter, it was 613,200, right? That number matters to us. That as of this morning, it was 1,777 major community projects that we've implemented. So we track some of those things to know what we've put in and what the impact is. I think about some of our sustainability and how we're trying to keep water flowing, and we maintain uptime of 99.6 or 99.7% for managed water points when we're keeping water flowing, because that's part of a promise we make. If we're inviting a community to pay for maintenance services, their water better be flowing. And then also our response time. Like in Uganda, in East Africa, we respond to emergency breakdowns for our maintenance community in 18 hours. That was our average time last year, 18 hours. So that's a KPI that, we track that, we talk about that, we ask people to measure us by it. And then I think about, it's a little harder at the systems level, but I think about right now we're building out the data capacity for the government, helping them have a live data system where they can see all the water assets. And so currently there's all kinds of numbers we track that, but how many districts? There's 146 districts, and 18 of them have been onboarded in the last year and a half. and we track
Nice.
the number of partners engaged. So all these things, like we go on and on, but we want to be data driven and data informed. But ultimately, we have to lead, but that really helps us to have the information and measure success.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think the other thing too is the numbers tell a story. Like the numbers tell the story of the impact. Story is no accident on my part right here.
No.
The story that you can tell, and I never thought about it until you just said it, James. It's one thing to drill a well, but how do you keep the water flowing, and what do you do when it breaks down? And that would explain, some of the staffing that you have on the ground, and how you've been able to change lives in this global community by being able to just go in and have those numbers, right? To be able to communicate it with the government. I'm sure they're very interested in what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that partnership of whether it's, internally we're learning, we're in our sector, we're collaborating with other organizations. I mean, that's a lot of that. We have a lot of people wonder about that too. They're like, I know you're not the only ones doing this. Do you guys ever talk and work together? Yeah, absolutely. Our staff is interacting every week with 6 to 10 other organizations any given week. But then the government, absolutely being able to interface and get on the same page and align our goals, align our indicators so that we're all pulling in the same direction. We're all fighting for the same outcome and advocating for that. So it really does. I think those indicators really do help us not just measure our own performance, but then align for that shared impact.
Yeah. And, as I think about it, having those communications across those organizations and partners, it's not like you showed up down the street here in the US and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. Like you have to be culturally sensitive when you go into these areas. So maybe just share, I know you have to be that way, but share maybe some things where you might need to tread a little bit differently than, we come in with our elbows out as U.S. citizens coming in saying we're taking over.
Yeah,
Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. I think there's it. This is where I learned so much from our Ugandan staff. We have like I said, we have about 50 on staff on the ground. We have an incredible. Our staff on the ground are all Ugandans, so it's a completely national office there. And there's so much that we on this side are learning from them about how to approach different challenges, different situations. We always invite and require buy-in from the community. And so how you approach that, because as you could imagine, that's an area of sensitivity, because you might have a community that you look around and you go, okay, this community has the ability to easily contribute towards this project in one way or another, labor, materials, finances. Because you can see sometimes the indicator, right? And yet you still have to invite them, because you can't require that, you can't demand it, you have to invite it, and so figuring that out, and then you walk into communities where you can tell we still want them to have the respect of buy-in, right? Their own self-respect of buy-in and the dignity of saying we contributed and made this possible as well, and yet you can tell, oh, this community is really, really struggling. And so being sensitive to how you invite that and then validate that that contribution. So for instance, we've been in communities where we ask them to contribute, stone, sand, and bricks towards building a rainwater system. And, maybe the stone isn't a big enough pile, and maybe the sand is intermixed with a lot of mud. And maybe the bricks, you could tell, are left over from a building project a few years ago, and so they're kind of old. And you look and go, okay, this is a substandard material, but you have to really recognize what was the cost to this community of that contribution, and you need to receive it and validate it, and then provide a covering of, all right, we're going to go ahead and supplement some of these materials, but we really want to recognize, hey, you guys really, there was, sweat and blood on these, you really had the heart. It was the pound of flesh, right? Like it was. And so I think those are some areas where you have to really understand and walk carefully. Yeah,
I think that's really true. And doing that gives them ownership in that project, right?
Yeah.
They could see there's a piece of me that made this happen. And I think that's important, whether you're working in a community on the other side of the world or whether you're in your local business, is how do we engage people and how do we make them see that their contribution is valued?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So when we're talking about business, we can't talk about business without talking about staying current or even staying ahead of the curve. So James, what role does innovation play in your organization?
Yeah, I'll tell you, we're always learning and always challenging the status quo. I think that, without challenging and criticizing are different, but I think we have to stay in that sort of always curious frame of mind. I think curiosity is such a powerful part of our culture and helps us to be good at what we do. And so, yes, learning best practices. So making sure we're, one of our expertise is one of our core values, where we want to really know our job, our sector, and the greater context we work in. But a couple areas where innovation shows up, I think, in our model of how we implement. So, for instance, our AquaTrust program is basically a professional maintenance service we're offering. And so not all charities are looking to pivot to a part of their work where the community pays for their service. And so we had to innovate and figure out what's affordable and how you deliver that. And how do you take our team that's used to doing charitable interventions and essentially turn them into a community sales team as well. Yeah. So that requires new skills. Funding innovation, like you don't always think about innovations in funding, but one of the things we're doing right now with some partners is we've actually said, you know what? We understand the concerns and fears. We know other people have done poor quality work, and that really can be disillusioning. So we will put ourselves in the position for a performance-based funding model. And that's where we basically take all the risk and say, we're going to work hard to maintain things in a community for a quarter. And then we report on how we did. And then donors who have said, if you hit these marks, then we'll pay for the work you just did. And so it's sort of this like radical transparency and saying, all right, if we can't perform well in this, if we can't do our charitable mission well, then don't pay. We don't deserve to be paid for this. So things like that. And then we do some hardware innovation too. We are, I think about, I've got, parts on my desk that these are made out of polymers. And, formerly in Uganda, we would use rubber parts for these. And now we're working with manufacturers in our country to extend working life cycles and things like that. So you have to do a lot of learning and really pushing that out. But we're saying, how do we live it at least always being able to see and be in touch with the leading edge and the live edge of our sector.
Yeah. And I think that's where I really appreciate your business approach. And, a few weeks ago, we're in a mastermind together, and I happened to be sitting at your table and leaned over to you. And I didn't even know you were going to get up and present. And I said, James, I would really love to have you back on the podcast because I love how you approach this as a business. And you said, well, just wait a minute, because I'm going to get up and make an act to do this.
Yeah.
And it's not something, it's not, I'm going to run this as a business and never ask. If you never ask, that would not, it's kind of like as a business owner, if you don't have a call to action, if you don't ask for the sale, you're not going to have a business for very long. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but I love what you have done, and I'll just share it with our audience right now, is you got up in front of our mastermind and really told a little bit about how you do run it as a business and the impact that we can make as global citizens on this planet. Talk about innovation. You do have a challenge out to our mastermind, and I'm just going to let you share that because you're going to say it better than I do.
Yeah. And so we recognize, we're going into the tail end of the year when a lot of us reflect, and, we're coming up to Thanksgiving. And so a lot of us are looking at gratitude or just on the financial side, we're getting ready to close out a tax year. And so we're looking at our financial, our philanthropic and charitable contributions, whether it's the values and traditions of the season or some of those, financial drivers. This is the biggest giving season of the year. And so the invitation was just recognizing, hey, if you as business owners and entrepreneurs that are part of our mastermind community want to see an impact on one of the most persistent problems on the planet that is solvable, and you want to be part of that, we had a couple of donors who have laid down a lead gift as a challenge to say, hey, we want to encourage people in that position in this community to give. And so we put out a challenge to raise $20,000 by the end of November, and it will be matched. And so it's sort of a way of just rewarding and incentivizing and validating community coming together around this shared set of values to make a measurable impact on some of the projects we're trying to finish by the end of the year, or get funding for the end of the year. You know, we've got schools that need water systems. We've got clinics that need water systems. We've got broken wells that are just sitting there waiting to be repaired. And it was a great invitation to say, hey, if this is something that you want to explore and you want to be part of, this is a cool way to do it.
Yeah.
And if you like a good deal, you know, then it's on sale right now, you know. And so it was a great opportunity to just invite them. And even while I was talking, people were saying, yeah, let's step up and do it. And then since then, several are just like you, are saying, hey, I want to talk about this in a larger conversation and see who else might have an interest in joining us in that campaign, because it's still going and we haven't hit our goal yet. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, it is still going. And this episode will air the first week of November. So if you're listening to this, if you're listening to this, I want to give you a chance to make an impact, because I think when you hear, you know, $10,000 to $12,000 to drill a well and to have this in place, but you know, knowing that if I give $1, it's really $2. There's something that's very manageable. And I believe you gave us a figure of something that was around $200 or $250.
Yes.
It would purchase something. What was that, James?
Yeah, well, I think what I talked about was for $2,000 we can restore a well.
Okay.
And essentially, if you look at all of the work that we do, one of the KPIs that we track is basically for every about $18 to $22 that are donated to our organization, we reach another person in Uganda with safe water. And so if you understand, like, oh, when we talk about this as solvable, that means, you know, that's at anybody's scale, they can make a contribution that they know brings somebody else across the finish line. But so for this incentive, for this campaign we're doing with our friends in our mastermind and the community connected to them, there's a whole series of broken wells in a couple of districts where we're working. And for $2,000, we can bring, it's about 300 to 500 people that use each of these wells. These are hand pump wells. And for $2,000, we can bring one back to life, completely restore it, new hardware, train the community. And again, you could look at it two ways, either two for the price or one, or they're half price, one way or the other. That means that what you're thinking you're capable of is a lot more. And maybe you never realized just how tangible of an impact. I mean, that's a safe water Christmas, you know, with how fast we work. That's a safe water Christmas for people. And so it's just exciting. I love how practical and doable this is, that it breaks down to, you know, this is not millions of dollars, you know. This is something that you and I, or the people that are in our community, can actually make a difference in.
Yeah, and I love that figure. $18 to $20 will bring water to one person. So $100, you're bringing 5 more people in. $200, you're bringing 10 more people in. And I can imagine having a well in your community and having access to water to where you're not having to send your children out into the unknown to get dirty water out of a stream. Yeah. You've got clean water, and then that breaks, right?
Right.
It breaks the disappointment, the heartbreak, the danger that you then, you know, put your children or your loved ones in as they go out to find more water, and dirty water. So I love this opportunity, James, of being able to do it. So I'd like to invite my listeners as well to consider about how that might be able to be, you know, you want to get up and do something good today.
Right.
You know, $20 is going to bring in one more person, but if you give, it's actually 2 more people. So that was something that really compelled me. And the way you ask is, you're not asking as, would you help us do it? It's, you're asking of, you can do it, right?
Yeah.
Like really getting involved in that.
Yeah,
So,
and that's the world we live in. We are connected. The distance between someone hearing this for the first time, maybe they've never heard of our organization, maybe they don't know where Uganda is on a map in East Africa, but the distance between your moment of discovery and your moment of impact is such a short distance in the world we live in. And we do a lot to help you understand, everything from photos and GPS to even just the fact that we're not this huge behemoth organization. We're a small organization. Like you can email me at james@ugandanwaterproject.com. There's accessibility. You are connected to the solution and the impact. And when you think about the average family size in Uganda is 5 to 7 people, $100, that's a family whose life changes because you can help provide safe water access. And that for me, I always ask myself, because the truth is my day-to-day life is very different than the suffering that happens in some of these communities. And so I always am asking myself, how do I step into that story in a way that I can understand it and relate to it? Because in my life experiences, if I will learn and then identify in my heart to understand what is that experience, compassion and action come easy.
Yeah, it really does. So as you talk about telling that story, you've got an amazing video, and I'll put that link in the show notes as well. I watched it several times yesterday. That it's really compelling. When you start out, you see this big yellow plastic jug that someone is carrying through. So tell us a little bit about what role storytelling has in helping people get an idea of what's going on in the ground.
Well, it's critical because at the end of the day, we don't help causes. We don't even help problems. We help people. All of us. That's how, I don't mean we like we as the organ. I mean we, you and me, and the person who's listening and watching this. We help people, and it's the story that helps us. Not a made up story. This is the story lived every day in Uganda. The story lived every day here at home, where it's the idea of imagine there's someone like you. There's someone like you in Uganda right now. And you think, no, they're Africans that live this life. I've read National Geographic, and I guarantee you there is someone who is like you, who laughs at the same jokes, who has the same kinds of passion and drive, or the same value for family life or connecting in their community. There is someone like you. There is someone like your children. There is someone like your best friend. There is someone like the person you're partnered with in business. There is someone who is like your neighbor, your parents, your friends. And they're immersed in a problem right now. And if we can pause and see that and understand and step into their moment, I have a lot of optimistic hope for what the human heart and our community does in response to that. I know for myself, a lot of times my hesitation to get involved really is about a fear of how vulnerable I have to be if I get involved. Yeah. And if I'm willing to enter into the understanding of the problem, but then also embracing a little bit of the agony of like, boy, what must that be like?
Yeah. And I think too, when you speak to that, as you were talking, I was thinking, I'm sitting here with a cup of clean water that I'm drinking. And when it goes dry, I know exactly where to go get it, and I can trust it. And, there are people that when we need water, we just go to the tap and turn it on, or you have your bottled water, or, it is accessible for us. But I know one thing you do, James, is you do also lead people to Uganda who want to be there to see it firsthand. So tell us what experiences, and I know we had a couple of people from our mastermind went, and I think you've got another trip going. Tell us what people do when you take them on these trips. What are they experiencing?
Yeah, there's a couple of different opportunities each year for people to actually come with us, and it's not voluntourism. It's actually a pretty arduous selection process, but the invitation to come and immerse yourself into, come to to the heart and the front lines of this this need and this opportunity. We want people to identify and understand what the problem really looks like. There is only so much storytelling I can do. But I'll tell you what, when you are standing on the red dirt of Uganda and you smell that faint smell of wood smoke in the air, and you feel the equatorial sun on your back of your neck, and you feel the weight of a jerry can in your hand with the seam of that plastic jerry can kind of digging into your fingers under the weight of that water, I'm telling you, there is a indelible mark made on you. And so understanding the problem, talking to the community, understanding up close and personal, what does it take to get this work across the finish line? So understanding our solutions. We want people to understand those things, but then also to have some deep love and exposure to the community, the culture, the people, because it's an amazing place with all kinds of potential. Because that's really what this is about. This is about unlocking the bondage of disease and poverty and unleashing the potential of a nation. And so bringing you there's things that you learn and are exposed to that there's no amount of pictures and social media and videos or storytelling, as effective as it is, there's only so much I can do to put you there. And if a picture's worth 1,000 words, a moment on the ground is worth 1,000,000.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I've experienced that, not in Uganda, but I have experienced that being in a different country, feeling what you're feeling and doing that. And there's nothing like it. There's no snapshot, no movie, no music that can replicate the power of doing that. But, one thing, James, is as we look at Uganda's a long way away from the U.S. And where we are right now in the world and where we are right now in time, this episode is going to air on what we have in the United States as Election Day, right? I don't think we've ever been in a more divisive time in history, in a more divisive time in the world. But I think throughout the world, there's going to be so many elections this year. There are so many global crises. There's so much impact with weather and climate change and all that. So where we have been very divisive of saying, oh, that's not our problem, or you don't think like I do, so I'm going to call you wrong. I think instead of looking at divisiveness, this is an opportunity to flip the script and let's look at how we can come together.
Yes.
Whether it is in our local communities or in the globe, it's not like we can go to the local airport and take a flight. Well, I guess maybe some people do, but, launch into outer space and go find a new place to live. Like, this is our home. This planet is our home. And what impacts one part of the planet impacts the other. So I want to talk about the elephant in the room that most people are thinking about when they think about, why would I give to a charity on the other side of the world when we in the United States have all these problems, across the continent or even in our own communities? Let's speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that's a valid question. That is I don't hear that and go, what's wrong with you for asking it, right? The truth is, I also agree that most charity should happen at home, in the community that I am living in, that I am helping, that I have a responsibility for, that I am building, where I am raising my family. And so I also agree that most charity should start at home. And so I think that's important. And I think right now, one of the obvious things that comes to mind is some of, for years we've had water issues in our own country. We have, California has issues, we've got friends in Colorado. They're always dealing with water issues. Many of us still talk about what's going on in Flint, Michigan, right? But then even in our current situation, we just had 2 horrendous hurricanes, Milton and Helene, rip up through the Gulf and up into North Carolina and Florida and these places. And so people are saying, hey, how could we help someone on the other side of the ocean before we help here? And I say, hey, first of all, if you have a passion to see something change here, then do it. Get involved wholeheartedly. But I think it's also a great reminder, because the truth is, you got people in Montana who are giving to relief work in North Carolina who have never set foot in North Carolina, helping people they do not know. And I think it's just like we do that and choose to say, I will embrace people in other places of our country as my neighbor. I think that's something to keep in mind, of like, that's powerful. And it's an awfully small planet. We are all members of planet Earth, and we are all citizens of planet Earth, and we are all neighbors here on planet Earth. And the other thing I think about is, I was actually last week I was supposed to be in Asheville and Black Mountain, North Carolina, that area that just got devastated. I was supposed to be down there for a conference, and so needless to say, that did not happen. But I know those communities. Can you imagine, like right now, the neighbors in Black Mountain can't help the neighbors in Asheville. Not much, it's certainly, you see some of it, and vice versa. They are both immersed in this problem. They need the larger community to come alongside them. And as much as, people have differing degrees of confidence in things like FEMA and these other big programs, but ultimately it's about community that solves these problems. It's the one-to-one neighbors around the country and around the world making a difference. It's people, all kinds of small charities and church groups and larger charities and organizations, Red Cross and everything, that come together as a community to respond. And honestly, some of these issues, like in Uganda, are not that different. Just like Asheville is struggling to help Black Mountain, those that are in Uganda, all struggling with the water crisis, have a hard time responding to the water crisis. And so we, as a community who live next door, have an opportunity and at least the responsibility to ask, what could my role be? What should my role be? And so I think those are the things that come to my mind. And I say, hey, not every problem is yours to solve. So, hey, if your heart doesn't spark about this, that's okay. You got plenty to do right here at home or other places in the world. But for those that hear this and go, that is a solvable problem, those people do deserve to have a hope and a future that they can build. And maybe I could, for $18 to $20 or for $100 for a family, step in and do something. If that's sparking in you, then welcome to the neighborhood.
Yeah. And I think the point that I take away from that, James, is be the change you want to see in the world. There is something that will speak to you, whether it is the Ugandan Water Project or something else. But, I love your idea of a family, 5 to 7 people, for $100, you could change the lives of that family, or even 2 families with this match opportunity.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
Yeah, which is really great. So when we think about, all that you've been through and all that you've shared here, what's been really the most significant learning curve in running this project, and how has it shaped you personally?
Yeah, I'm an impatient person. I like to work fast. I like to just jump into things. And I have a certain amount of tolerance for a bit of chaos. So, I don't mind it being a little messy. I don't have to have everything lined up before I'll step in. And while that certainly helps in what we do, learning from, me learning to lead the organization to adjust our pace to move at the speed of trust has been a big learning curve. That nothing moves any faster than the level of trust. And so if we need to build that, we have to slow down and build that. But then once that's established, nothing can move faster than a community that is working in trust with one another and confidence in that relationship and connection and alignment. And so that requires some patience, and that has been a big learning curve to figure out, how do you do that based on whether it's individuals or groups that are either giving or funding, or organizations that we collaborate with, or, when you're an entrepreneurial wired, guy that likes to work at the speed of a pit crew, and yet we're serving the national government of Uganda that moves at a slightly different speed of a national government, that is different. But having to go through that learning curve of adjusting to the speed of trust, that really is very helpful.
Yeah, that's it's a beautiful way to look at it. And it's true of any of us who offer a service. You are only going to go as far as the people that trust you, that see you, that trust you. And I think your level of transparency, your ability to run this like a highly efficient operation, the KPIs you have, I think that goes a very far way in building that trust. So for the last question, James, I want to ask you, what do you hope people take away from learning about the Ugandan Water Project and the global water crisis? What would you like to leave them with?
Yeah, I mean, it's really straightforward. This is solvable. The water crisis has been one of the most persistent problems on the planet. It kills people every day. It holds so many other things back, whether it's education or opportunity for women, girls, or healthcare or economic development. It holds so many things back, but it is solvable. And it's solvable not just by experts, not just by rich people, not just by governments. It's solvable by all who choose to engage. And that means you and me and whoever's listening. It's solvable. I keep a Margaret Mead quote right next to me. In fact, I'll read it to you. It says, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has." And I think that is so true. This is a solvable problem, and every person could take a step that is their sized step to have a meaningful impact in the water crisis. And that's pretty incredible, because this absolutely should be the last generation of children walking for water. And I want my grandkids to have to look this up to understand it. Not look on the television, not look, next door. I want them to have to do some hard research to understand, what do you mean we used to have a problem with water in the world? And so solvable is the one thing I would love for people to know that they can participate in, and that this is true.
Yes. And I think the thing is that it is, like you said, it doesn't have to be people who have lots and lots of money. Each of us have the potential to do it. Even our children, we could get our kids involved in a project, as they drink water, just knowing that they're helping to provide for that as a family, what could be done. So, James, thank you so much for being with us today. I think it's very timely. I think, again, with where the world is now, this is a chance to be that change you want to see in the world, to bring us all together and quit finger pointing and making other people think that they're the problem when really we all can be the solution. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I just thank you for the chance to be with you again. I love every conversation we share, either in this format or when we see each other face to face. Lisa, you're great. And if people want to stay in touch with us, we're easy to find. And in fact, a great place to start, because of what we talked about today, is go to our website, but go first to ugandanwaterproject.com/mastermind, and you'll see what we've been up to with this campaign. You can even throw a few bucks in that direction, or a few more. And we'd love to stay in touch. We're easy to find on social media as well. Just look for Ugandan Water Project.
Yes. And I invite everyone to join in with me to make a donation. And if you do, send me a little note so I can thank you properly. And I just really appreciate being able to be part of something that's so big for all of us. So today, as we wrap up, James has shown us that when you have a passion, that you just don't necessarily need to think about it, but think about how you can have relevancy in the world. What does your audience need to hear? What do they need? Where are they? What are they thinking? And answering the question about, well, why should I help someone on the other side of the world? That person is your neighbor too. How do people feel about it? And what is the right timing? And as we look at the end of the year for giving, or as we look at the season of just being full of gratitude, there's a lot of opportunity for this. So if you are interested in looking at how to reimagine your passion and turn it to a project, I want to invite you to take my Reimagine quiz. That's another link that'll be in the show notes, folks. It's going to be chock full of value today. So go chase your passion. It will reveal your purpose and take you on the path to your legendary self. It's when you show up as your personal brand of integrity that you can live that fulfilling life. We'll see you here next week.